President Obama's deal before the deal with Iran becomes fodder for the 2016 campaign. And as the president starts trying to sell it to lawmakers, Israel's prime minister calls it a path to a nuclear bomb for his sworn enemy. This is Special Report. Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Brett Baer. Bipartisan howls from Congress and strong opposition from Israel are greeting President Obama's attempt at a legacy-building nuclear arms agreement with Iran. However, Iran's president says he'll keep up his end of the deal if the U.S. does. We have Fox team coverage tonight. Carl Cameron with a look at how the Iran situation may factor into the 2016 presidential race. But we begin with Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen at the State Department tonight, which is dealing with mixed messages about what was actually agreed to. Good evening, James.
Brett, good evening. Secretary of State John Kerry convened a 7-nation conference call this morning aimed at reassuring disquieted Gulf allies from the Saudis to the Kuwaitis, even as he also sought to dispel claims being made about the proposed terms by the leaders of Iran. In Tehran, jubilation in the streets over the proposed nuclear terms, with Iran's foreign minister greeted with a hero's welcome. Javad Zarif himself took to Twitter to challenge what he called the State Department's spin in its fact sheets, particularly on the timing of sanctions relief. Citing separate documents, he tweeted, Iran 5+1 statement, U.S. will cease the application of all nuclear-related secondary economic and financial sanctions. Is this gradual? In Jerusalem, the nuclear talks' most prominent critic also appeared unpersuaded by the volume of technical detail contained in the fact sheets issued by the State Department.
The deal would not shut down a single nuclear facility in Iran, would not destroy a single centrifuge in Iran, and will not stop R&D on Iran's advanced centrifuges. On the contrary, the deal would legitimize Iran's illegal nuclear program.
Secretary of State Kerry, having spent 19 of the last 34 days negotiating in Switzerland, arrived at 6 a.m. in the nation's capital, with aides to him and President Obama professing little concern about how Zarif was portraying the terms.
The fact is, he's not contradicting any of the facts, any of the understandings that are included in that fact sheet. And he's obviously out there trying to make the case to his population and to his country's leadership that he got a good deal. We're doing the same thing.
State Department officials acknowledge that much of the parameters announced is tentative, including whether Iran's estimated breakout time for a nuclear weapon would remain 1 year after the accord's 10th year.
This is part of what's going to be negotiated over the next 3 months.
Whether IAEA inspectors will have access to military installations Iran has blocked up to now.
We would find it, I think, very difficult to imagine a JCPOA that did not require such access at Parchin.
What will happen when inspectors deem a site suspicious and Iran disagrees?
The dispute resolution process, all the details still have to be worked out.
And how soon Iran can research and develop new centrifuge designs.
We still have some R&D issues to work out, and those are among the most challenging, to be frank.
Deputy Secretary of State Tony Blinken will be hitting the road shortly, visiting 5 Mideast nations in coming days, even as officials back here in Washington scramble to put together a summit for our Gulf allies at Camp David. Brett?
James Rosen live at the State Department. James, thank you. The Iran agreement is raw meat for many of the Republicans who want a chance to replace President Obama in 2017. Time will tell how it plays for the presumptive Democratic nominee. Chief Political Correspondent Carl Cameron looks at 2016 contenders' reaction to the deal.
Add the June deadline for President Obama's nuclear deal with Iran to the foreign policy flashpoints overshadowing former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's presidential announcement this month. Most GOP hopefuls distrust Iran and oppose the deal. Former Florida Governor Jeb Bush said he won't stand by the deal because it was flawed from the start. Quote, these negotiations began by President Obama's own admission as an effort to deny Iran nuclear capabilities, but instead will only legitimize those activities. Even before the agreement was reached, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker said the threat is so grave that he would undo the deal right after his inauguration.
If I'm honored to be elected by the people of this country, I will pull back on that on January 20th, 2017, because I think the last thing, not just for the region, but for this world, we need is a nuclear-armed Iran.
There is evil in the world today. It's always been there.
The Conservative American Legacy PAC, where Dr. Ben Carson chaired efforts to kill Obamacare, is now running an ad about the Iran deal that morphs Hitler appeaser Neville Chamberlain into President Obama.
In a dangerous world, It's time for American leadership, not surrender.
Democrats know Republicans will blame Clinton if the deal collapses and also if it comes together.
If it passes muster, they'll still be attacking her for giving a pathway to the bomb to the Iranians.
Indeed, as the top diplomat during Obama's entire first term, Mrs. Clinton helped design the current approach to Iran. In a statement more than 200 words long, she said Iran can never be permitted to acquire a nuclear weapon, and reaching a deal in June is crucial. Then left room for her to abandon it. Quote, "I know well that the devil is always in the details in this kind of negotiation. There's much to do and much more to say in the months ahead, but for now, diplomacy deserves a chance to succeed." Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul, who has argued in the past that diplomacy is better than blowing up the talks and going to war with Iran, didn't weigh in on the deal. He was unavailable all week to prepare for his campaign launch this Tuesday in Louisville. He was also silent on the debate over religious freedom this week, too. Brett?
All right, Carl, thank you. Well, now here to the U.S. and the economy. More signs of a weakening economy tonight. Employers added the fewest jobs in March over the last year and a half. We have Fox team coverage on the state of the economy. Liz Clayman in New York with what this means perhaps going forward. First, correspondent Kevin Corke at the White House with the details and Washington reaction. Good evening, Kevin.
Brett, good evening to you. The president's road trip hitting a bit of a pothole tonight when those job numbers came out, and that could knock him off message for quite some time.
We can't maintain the best military that the world has ever known unless we also have an economy that's humming.
At Hill Air Force Base in Utah, President Obama took a break from touting his administration's solar power initiatives to acknowledge today's disappointing job numbers, which came in well below estimates.
Government has to work to take the steps that we know will grow our economy. And I'm hoping that working with Congress, we can get some things done this year.
The sooner the better. The economy added just 126,000 new jobs in March, ending a 12-month streak of creating at least 200,000 jobs. It's the worst number since December 2013.
The 126,000 jobs created last month is an anemic number because America has the capacity to do so much more, and the fact is we needed up around 350,000 a month to bring down unemployment more.
The weakness was broad, with the largest slowdowns in construction, manufacturing, and leisure hospitality. Analysts pointed to the drop in oil prices and severe winter weather for slamming the brakes on job growth. Despite the decline, the White House maintains the economy is on the right track. 3 million new jobs in the past year, 12 million over the past 5 years, and 61 straight months of job growth.
I think there's volatility from quarter to quarter, but if you look over a longer period, 6 months, a year, you can see that the U.S. economy has had a good trend.
But more than half, 55% of those surveyed in our latest Fox News poll say they're nervous about the economy. Fewer than 4 in 10 say they're confident. This as the number of Americans not in the labor force exceeded 93 million for the first time, with the job participation rate falling under 63%, matching a 37-year low. That means a lot of people out there who want to work have simply stopped looking. By the way, the unemployment rate remains steady, Brett, at 5.5%, but that's expected to rise just a bit in the coming months with summer vacation and graduations quickly approaching.
Kevin Corke live on the North Lawn. Kevin, thank you. Now joining us from our sister network, Fox Business Network's Liz Clayman, with more on the economy and the jobs picture. Good evening, Liz.
Good evening, Brett. Kevin was smart to point out the labor participation rate in that report. It is ugly at this point. People have simply dropped out of the workforce. They have either been discouraged or they're just giving up. We also have a demographic change. Trying to be fair and balanced here and take a look at all of the things that are into play here, but this number is not a good one. It's a stinker. However, does one bad number a trend make? We have to be really careful to also point out that in the last year, in the aggregate, we have seen over the last year the strongest job gains in the past 2 decades, Brett. So there are good parts, there are bad parts. The wage growth part of this looked a little bit better than expected, but overall this is just not a good number, and it leads people to wonder, now what does the Federal Reserve do? Because as you know, you've talked about this, Brett, Janet Yellen, the head of the Federal Reserve, has said that labor numbers, the job numbers, are extremely important. It's one of the most important numbers on her so-called dashboard of economic data that she looks at. So you wonder, are we even going to see a rate hike this year?
Liz, when you hear the White House saying this is on bad weather, what do you think?
I personally don't think so. Here's why. Because, yes, Boston was slammed with snow. The eastern seaboard slammed with very cold temperatures, and there was a week or two where we really did see a very cold weather gripping much of the nation. However, you have to look at what a lot of economists are saying now is the new normal, Brett. When you touch a hot stove, as many businesses did several years ago during the housing bubble, you get burned really badly. And you remember that, and you try and say, let's not be profligate in our hiring. So I think the new normal is that businesses are very conservative when it comes to upping hiring. And as things start to get better, you will see better numbers. This isn't the worst number in the world, but it does give you pause and make you wonder what really is going to happen next month.
And Liz, quickly, can you look to another country where things look better?
No, you talk to very smart people on both sides of the aisle. The U.S. is one of the best things going. It's an excellent question, Brett, because people say, well, how about China? China's been such a stimulating place for a lot of business growth, but China's having its own troubles. Russia's a total disaster, as you know. The sanctions are hitting that hard. So what about other nations? Well, Europe is entering that stage of central bank stimulus that we just exited. We're pretty much the best thing going right now.
Liz, as always, thank you. Don't miss Liz on our sister network, and if you are not sure where to find Fox Business Network in your area, just log on to foxbusiness.com/channel finder. Up next on this Good Friday, a look at the growing persecution of Christians. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. WDRB in Louisville, where heavy rains caused flash flooding throughout the area early today. Police report a mother and a child remain missing after their car was swept into a flooded creek this morning. Meanwhile, nearly 200 firefighters have battled this blaze at a General Electric plant, shut down the production at that sprawling facility today. WAVY in Norfolk, Virginia, as a sailor is reportedly rescued after 66 days lost at sea. Lewis Jordan says he was sailing in his 35-foot vessel north from Conway, South Carolina, when he hit bad weather. He says he survived by rationing his water and eating raw fish. And this is a live look at Indianapolis from Fox 59, our affiliate out there. The big story there, of course, Final Four weekend. The National College Basketball semifinals are Saturday night with the championship game Monday. But there are concerts and plenty of other events going on all weekend with stars such as Rihanna, Lady Antebellum, and Imagine Dragons. How about that? That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway. From Special Report, we'll be right back.